Roger, so biodiversity, it's everybody talks about biodiversity. In your opinion, why is biodiversity so important for farming?
Well, biodiversity is really important for farming because a lot of people, when they think about biodiversity, they think about nature reserves, they think about protected areas, but actually there's a tremendous amount of wildlife that depends on farmland. And biodiversity, as well as being supported by farming, farming actually needs to have biodiversity as well to ensure that we can produce profitable, high-yielding crops. Biodiversity is important as well for the crop production.
And if you think of all the different programs that are included in the farm policy, would you rank biodiversity as one of the top targets, or would you say this is amongst a bunch of targets that are beneficial, or what would your estimate be?
I suggest it should be one of the key targets, because we have to consider agriculture with wider society, and wider society are interested in biodiversity and they want to see more wildlife in our countryside. Farming has a very important role in providing and helping to support that wildlife.
What is your experience of the perception of the British farmers towards the goal of biodiversity? Are they interested in providing better biodiversity or not?
Over the last 15 years, very much so. There has been a sea change in the way that farmers acknowledge the biodiversity they have on their farms and are actively seeking to restore habitats, to the extent that today over 70% of farms have an agri-environment agreement on their farm. So they're working closely with the Government Wildlife Agency to actively support farm wildlife.
The Game Conservancy and Wildlife Trust has established a big farmland bird count, I think 5 years ago. And what was the reason for picking songbirds as a sign for biodiversity?
Well, one of the motivations for setting up the big farmland bird count was to acknowledge that there's actually quite a lot of good work going on farms to help increase farmland songbirds and other biodiversity. Because we often hear stories in the media that farming is responsible and that farmers are responsible for declines in wildlife. And we all know that wildlife has declined on farms over the last 40 to 50 years. But over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a tremendous amount of good work undertaken by farmers to restore wildlife. And we wanted that to be acknowledged and to provide encouragement for other farmers to do similar good work.
What is the role of gamekeeping? We talked today also about grey partridge and other game birds, and they correlate a lot with songbirds. So what, in your opinion, is the role of gamekeeping and shooting or hunting?
Well, a lot of the agri-environment measures that farmers have available to them now in Great Britain, measures like wild bird covers, beetle banks, conservation headlands, supplementary feeding of birds in late winter. All of these techniques were actually developed by gamekeepers and the game management community to support game birds on farms. But through scientific monitoring, we realised that lots of other birds are benefiting from that management. So a lot of the agri-environment schemes that we have now actually originated in the game management sector.
You did your second ID Day in Austria. Last year and this year we even had more participants, over 40 this year. What is your impression on the interest of the Austrian landowner community in comparison to the British one?
Well, I think it's actually very similar. It was great that last year we had 30 or so participants. This year we've had over 40 here today, so I think that shows that there's a growing interest in the big farmland bird count in Austria. We hope it expands further. And a lot of farmers recognise that this is a very valuable way of finding out what birds are on the farms. It's the first step in conservation. and it also helps to provide feedback and raise the profile of farming and wildlife. So we hope that more farmers participate in Austria.
And what is your estimate? When will we see biodiversity as an important part of member states' agro-policy? How long will it take before we have that established?
Well, I think that there is a growing recognition across the EU that if we are to recover farming and wildlife, then it's vital that the farmers are on board and are actively encouraged and helped to support the wildlife on their farms through having support directly from member states and from the EU.
Mm-hmm. And final question, there has been an immense decrease over the past decades of songbirds abundance and populations. Do you think that with these measures this trend can be stopped or even reversed?
Absolutely. We believe the downward trend in many farm bird species can be halted and indeed increased. There's lots of examples of local success where an individual farm has put in various measures such as late winter supplementary feeding or planting wild bird cover crops, nectar flower areas. We know that those deliver for bird conservation. If we can have those further afield across more farms, then yes, I believe that farm wildlife can be recovered.
Thank you.